Great. Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So I'd like to introduce Tristan Barnum to you. She is the product line director for Switchvox. I know many of you recognize Tristan, so we're glad to have her back again this year telling us about the state of Switchvox for 2011 and also looking at 2012. Tristan obviously is one of the founders of Switchvox, so she's one of the initial developers of this product. And so with no further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Tristan. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie. Can you guys all hear me okay? Awesome. So welcome to my annual talk about the state of the Switchvox. For 2011, we're going to recap what we did this year, and then I get to go into next year, too. I recognize a lot of you, so those of you that have been to this talk before, you're probably familiar with the format, and those of you that are new, welcome. As Angie said, my name is Tristan Barnum. I am one of the original 4 founders of Switchvox. Before we got acquired by Digium, we were our own independent company. And right now, my role is as the product line director for our business communications side of the house. So what that means, if you've been to any of the general talks about Digium, like by Danny or Mark, for example, you might have seen a slide that looks a little bit like this. It describes sort of the 2 sides of the Digium house, our Asterisk project and us being the founder and the maintainer and the main project sponsor of Asterisk. That's sort of one side of things. And then we have our for-profit part of the business. And that's where business communication systems falls in. Our board system, or our board side of the house is also down there. So you're all familiar probably with the fact that Digium manufactures boards, but we also make a complete phone system called Switchvox, and that's where business communication solutions fits in there, as well as our other software that we write to support that product, including Switchvox Notifier and Switchvox Mobile. So I'm the product line director for everything under that. So I know most of you are familiar with what Switchvox is, but it's possible that some of you are here to learn a little bit about what the Switchvox is first. Switchvox, at its core, is made for SMBs. So small and medium businesses, but what does that mean? It means we've got appliances that range anywhere from 35 users on the small end, so 35 and below, all the way up to a 400-user system. Our systems all peer together. So you can have a distributed enterprise with multiple locations, or you can stick a sales department on one big Switchvox and a support department on another big Switchvox and have those 2 things connect together. So they scale very well, and they all have Asterisk running inside of them. But Switchvox is really easy to use. We have a point-and-click web GUI that makes it possible to manage from anywhere, and it's not got a steep learning curve whatsoever. It's just all very, very simple to manage. Switchvox is sold through our network of value-added resellers for the most part. So any of those VARs are capable of installing the Switchvox for a customer, getting phones set up, getting that system configured exactly the way that a customer might need. So those of you that are interested in our partner program, I definitely encourage you to come and talk to me after the talk. So the other really important thing to know about Switchvox is that it's full of features. So of course we have voice through voice over IP and traditional lines. You can throw a Digium card in a Switchvox box and connect through T1 or whatever you have. But Switchvox also has a built-in fax server, a chat server through Jabber. It supports video. It has conferencing built in, voicemail, Microsoft integration. Basically anything an SMB would need to have a phone system and then some is already built in. And it's all included. So all you have to do is add phones. So it comes shipping on a server, already pre-installed. You just set it up, and all your users have all the features. There's no, pick and choose. I need the conferencing package or things like that. We don't do any of that. So on to some history with Switchvox to get us up to 2011. So in January of 2010, we had a nice big Switchvox release that was version 4.5. So those of you that remember 4.5, this is the one that included phone feature packs, so auto-provisioning of things like Polycom and Snom phones, SNMP, internationalization, and we introduced an XML API called Extend. And that's what allows you to access features of Switchvox in your own applications that you can write. And if you're interested in hearing more about Extend, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on in the talk, but stay in this room, and there's a panel after this specifically by people that have written things for Extend. So if you're interested in hearing about what you can do with it, that's a great thing. It's right after this. And then following that, David Podolsky, our Director of Engineering on the Switchvox side of things, will be going into great detail about using Extend. So this is one of the most exciting things you can do with Switchvox. So if you're interested in that stuff, stay. So 8 months after that, we released Switchvox 4.6, and that was in September of 2010. And that release was really designed to help administrators protect Switchvoxes that were out there, oftentimes from the users themselves, bad passwords, things like that. If you have Aster servers running, you know that they're just as vulnerable to bad passwords as anything else you might throw on the web. But we've done some things to make it really easy to keep them protected, alerts and things like that. And we also improved the update and the backup process. So that brings us up to 2010, or to 2011, sorry. So 8 short months after that, we had another major release, and that was Switchvox SMB 5.0. So prior to all of these, we had about a 12-month release cycle. So not only are we adding more features, but we're adding them faster. And one of the great things about Switchvox is that when you buy it, it's bundled with subscriptions that entitle you to support, user licenses, and any updates that we come out with throughout the year. So your subscriptions are really working for you because we're coming out with releases and new features really quickly. And they're a one-click application, and all your users will get those features. So let's take a look at what is in the new version for this year. So Switchvox 5.0, the main idea behind it is really that Switchvox is even easier to use now. So as you'll see, if you're familiar with the old GUI, the GUI got a complete refresh. So we had the same front end on Switchvox for a really long time. It served us well, but the web changes, lots of new technologies available. If you want to drag and drop stuff, move things around, use Ajax, and really make that interface slick. This not only helps with the administration of the system, which it surely does, but it helps demo the product as well. So if you are a reseller of Switchvox, you have a much flashier demo to give than any other phone system that's out there. It just looks really nice. So besides the obvious visual difference, we also made a lot of changes inside the product to make Switchvox easier to use. So we're going to talk about that. So 5.0 is comprised of some new features and lots of changes to existing features. Again, with the goal of making everything better and easier. So let's take a peek at the new features. The first new really big feature is fixed mobile convergence. So you might hear it referred to around here in the industry, analysts and things like that, as FMC. So if anyone says FMC, they're talking about fixed mobile convergence. And we don't call it that for end users because they have enough acronyms rattling around in their brains. But I've heard some grumbling here and there that we were a little late to the FMC party because other people have claimed they had FMC. But the way that we're doing it is much better than I think anyone else is doing it. And so we got to sort of look at what everyone else was doing and calling fixed mobile convergence and say, we're going to come out with something much better. And so, you know, you might be selling a system now that claims to have fixed mobile convergence, but you'll soon recognize that this is really much better. So we accomplished this through 2 main facets of fixed mobile convergence. The converged phones, the concept of converged phones, and something we call the in-call menu. So the first part of fixed mobile convergence is these converged phones, and that's what allows you to set up all of your phones to work in conjunction with your main Switchvox extension. So that keeps things really simple no matter where you are. No matter what phone you have, it's going to operate like one extension. And then the new in-call menu is the second part of fixed mobile convergence. And the in-call menu is what's going to let you easily transfer or record a call from any of your converged devices. So with converged phones, you can take all of your other Switchvox extensions and external phones so they all appear to be your primary extension. So for example, your Switchvox extension at home and your mobile phone can be converged with your main Switchvox extension on your desk. And those phones don't have to be running any kind of special software at all. No special client. You don't have to be on a specific network. So some of our competitors' offerings require you to have a separate box, be on a special network, install software. Ours doesn't have to do any of that, so that's why I think it's much, much better fixed mobile convergence. So you can even run all of your phones, including a $7 phone from Walmart as a converged phone, because you don't have to have this special software running. Now, we're not limited to iPhone and BlackBerry and Windows Mobile because you don't need your client. But I'll talk a little bit about how Switchvox Mobile works with your converged devices as well. So other competitors also have a feature called twinning, mobile twinning, twins too. They limit you to have 2 converged phones. We don't do that for you at all. You can converge up to 6 phones, and there's no additional charge for this feature. So if you've got 6 phones, some of them can be SIP phones. They'll have regular subscriptions on them, but if you have 2 other mobile phones or 2 mobile phones and a phone in your kitchen, you can converge all those. There's no additional licensing fees to add that capability in. So what happens when you actually converge a phone with your primary phone? So I've got my mobile phone, for example, is converged with my phone on my desk back in San Diego. So all of my voicemail messages and my faxes go to one mailbox. I just check that in Switchvox on the web. You can check it in your email. But I'm only looking at my messages in one place. My caller ID is always going to be that of my primary phone. So if I place a call here through Switchvox Mobile, which is a separate application that we released last year, it's going to keep my caller ID as my extension. If somebody calls me, it's going to cascade out to my cell phone because I have my call rules set up to do that, and they're not going to be any wiser about where that call has gone to. Now, the call logs all maintain themselves under my primary extension as well, but no matter where I'm making phone calls from, I have access to the in-call menu. And that's what's going to let me quickly transfer my phone calls to anywhere else, or I can even record my calls. So if I'm on a phone that doesn't have buttons for those features, so for example, this one doesn't have a recording button when you call me here, or when Switchvox finds me out on my cell phone, the in-call menu is really handy. Basically, it's an IVR that I can access by pressing ***. So let's say you call my extension. It's 103. So you call extension 103 on our main PBX in San Diego. I'm out of the office, so I have my call rules set to go out to my cell phone, and I answer this call. If I need to transfer you to support from here, I don't have a transfer button. Or if you're telling me something really important and I want to record it, like an address, I don't have a record button. But I can hit ***, and in my ear, I'll hear the in-call menu. It'll say, to transfer call, press 1, and I actually have access to all of my converged devices from here as well. So I have keys, hotkeys that I can press that'll transfer back to a desk phone or back to any of my other converged devices very quickly. So if I'm here and I walk into my office and I want to transfer the call that has gone out to my cell phone back to my desk phone because it sounds really nice, it's got HD voice, I can hit ***1, it's going to go directly back to my desk phone, that'll ring, this will disconnect, and you will not have heard any of that menu, and it will not have interrupted our call. It doesn't place you on hold or anything like that. So if you're fast enough with it, like I am now, I constantly transfer things from my desk to my cell and back again. I just hit ***1. I don't have to listen to the in-call menu. But in case I forget, or in case I want to go into more options, like transfer to an external phone, I can listen and be prompted through that IVR without the other person hearing any of it. Also I can record from there. So it's **# will get me into the submenu, and 3 will initiate a call recording, and that'll get stored on the Switchvox server itself, and I can access that recording from anywhere I can access the Switchvox web GUI from. So that is our FMC offering for 5.0. But we put in some other nice stuff. We have new graphs and new reporting. they're far more extensive. So those of you that have been using Switchvox for a while probably know that we have a features@switchvox.com email address where we take requests from users and resellers and anyone that has an opinion about how we can make Switchvox better. And one of the things we got to hear about all the time was there were never enough reports. And we always had a great reporting engine, but now it is even more extensive. And all traffic has virtually dried up on features.switchvox.com regarding reporting. It looks like we finally have every report any human being could ever need. So the other nice thing is we put in a new graphing engine, new graphing tool there. So they're animated, they're flashy, they're fancy, so they demo really nicely. So if you're making that pitch to a business guy and they want to see how they can make their business better and optimize their queues and save some money, and you run a report that shows when your peak hours are and it zooms in and animates, it makes quite an impact. So pretty fancy stuff. So remembering that the main idea behind 5.0 is that Switchvox was even easier to use. I hope it's obvious how fixed mobile convergence makes it way easier for the average user to handle their calls wherever they are and however they want to work. And the new reporting makes it easier to see what's going on in the queues and things like that. But we've also made a lot of changes to the existing features that make things easier too. So let's talk about the changes. The first one is extension groups can now include any kind of extension, including other groups. So they can be useful for a lot of the features that are in Switchvox. You can think of them almost like a folder. And we had groups before, but they weren't really everywhere you wanted to use them. You'd be wanting to set up a rule and apply it to a whole group of people, and that feature wasn't quite plugged in to everything yet, but it is now. So instead of forcing users or administrators to manage people individually, you can now apply stuff to a group very, very easily and know that all the settings are going to be correct because they're part of that group. So group members are now ordered as well. So if you want to throw a group into a call queue, it'll inherit that order of the group. So a little fancy polish there, and that made things a lot easier. So groups can also now be used in the outgoing caller ID rules. So if you've got a tech support group and you want their caller ID to show the direct tech support number, for example, you can set that up really super easily. Instead of doing everybody individually, you just pick the group. Also, you used to have to make individual call rules for failover, like stack them up. So you'd have like all your international calls that matched this pattern would go out over your PRI. And then if you wanted to make a failover for that, like if your PRI goes down a lot for some reason, you could stack another rule under that. That would be international failover and use this SIP trunk. And then if that one failed, international failover 2, another SIP trunk. But now those can all be managed in one place. So you can just have one international call rule. So Switchvox knows what an international call looks like. You type out the little pattern, 9011, whatever, country code, and 10 more digits. And then you get to decide if this one fails, then go to this one, then go to this one, and it's all maintained in one easy to find place. So a lot cleaner, less clutter in the interface, easier to manage. You can also order your incoming and outgoing caller ID rules and your incoming DID routes. So anywhere in the system where you had a list and you wanted to be able to reorder them, you can just drag and drop and reorder things. Makes it a lot easier to use. This, I think, is my favorite one, and most of our partners' favorite one as well. Bless you. There's a new tool called Bulk Modify for extensions, and what that does is it lets you change the settings for multiple phones at the same time, or multiple phone type extensions. So you get to select the extensions that you want to change, and then you create a set of modifications that you want to make on each of those extensions. So on the phone page itself, like on the extension page, you can move some stuff around, but notes. Inside Bulk Modify, let's say you wanted to make sure everyone was able to dial 911, and you set up a new route to be able to do that. And you said, okay, Switchvox, whenever anyone dials 911, I want you to go out over an analog line. And I set up a fancy failover that says, if that doesn't work, go out over the PRI, and if that doesn't work, go out over this other analog line. Well, you want to make sure all your users have that new setting. And so you can go into bulk modify, grab everyone, and say, you all now have permission to use this call rule. And instead of having to do that stuff individually, it just happens all at once. So almost every setting you would want to set for a person or a phone is in bulk modify, and you can do them all at once. So really easy. There's also reminder notes. So a lot of the Switchvox tools, you would make a change, or you would make a call rule, for example, like your 911 rule using this analog line. Why? Why did you do it? And for those of you that have multiple employees that manage a big group of systems, that stuff needs to be communicated. And so now you can leave a note next to your call rules, for example, and say, this was set up because this is our most reliable analog line. Do not delete. And that way, anyone that rolls over that rule is going to see that note and be able to know why you did something 4 years ago by a tech that isn't with you anymore. Or, heck, I manage enough systems that I forget why I do stuff too. So that's really handy. We also have new collection tools. And you'll see these sprinkled throughout the new interface. But what they do is they make it easy for you to administer any kind of collection. So you can put things in a collection and then mark them with a particular setting and put things in order. Those all go in the collector tools. So those new collections are used throughout the interface to manage groups of things, like groups of phone extensions, groups of call rules, groups of hosts, so that you have a really good idea about what's available to you, what you can apply, and do things very visually in the interface. So we tried to really improve that for you. So even though we haven't gotten to that slide yet, I keep saying we've made big changes to the GUI in Switchvox. And with all UI changes, probably since the dawn of time, we've gotten some feedback during our beta process from some of our resellers that think that they are the Switchvox samurai, and they don't need all the animations and all the bells and whistles. And it really, their traditionalist sensibilities were offended by all these fancy new animated things. So they didn't want to see all the pretty new graphics. They just wanted a lean, mean phone calling machine. So we made Minimalist Mode. And so it's very easy to set Switchvox into Minimalist Mode. And what that does is it gives you a little bit more space on the screen, sort of scooches things up, makes buttons smaller, turns off the animations, and really turns off some of the graphics so that things load quickly and you can see more of what you're doing on the screen at a time. So it's a nice lightweight version of the interface. So we like that. Switchvox Extend was introduced in SMB 4.5, I mentioned earlier. And at that point, I had said the goal for Extend was to make every action that you could do in the Switchvox GUI available programmatically through Extend. So let's say inside Switchvox you can see how many calls are waiting in the queue. We wanted to be able to allow your applications to make a call to Switchvox and say, hey, how many calls are waiting in the queue, so that you can display that wherever you felt it was appropriate. So if you're making a mobile application, so that managers could be up to speed on how many calls were waiting in the queue, you would have access to that information. Well, the way that we said we would do this was every time we had to touch a feature, either by writing a new feature or touching an old feature to improve it, we would rewrite it so that it used Extend. So the Switchvox interface itself should one day be running completely off of Extend, just like any of your apps that you write. We're using the same API and the same documentation and the same methods and everything to make that happen. So when we first introduced it, there were a few new features in 4.6, and they all used Extend, but the list of available methods was fairly short. And we tried to hit all the things that would be most requested, certainly, but there would definitely be times when we'd hear from people and they'd say, I'm trying to make this app and I need this call and it's not there. And we were as responsive as we could be and tried to add those things as you requested them. But every subsequent edition of Switchvox has improved that API because we've had to touch more and more features and we've added new ones. So The great news here is that in 5.0 this year, we reached this tipping point where suddenly there were more calls available, more methods available to you inside Switchvox than sort of reached that halfway point and went past it. So there's more you can do with Extend now than you can't do with Extend. So your chances of running into something that you want to do, that you can see Switchvox doing, and you want your app to be able to do the same thing, it's definitely shrinking. So more and more methods available, and all of that stuff is documented in Switchvox, in Developers Central, which is at digium.com, developers.digium.com/switchvox. So we have forums available there where you can discuss with other developers and with our developers. We lurk about in there and pop in from time to time to answer questions that no one else can answer. And also a great place if you're looking for an app to be built to go find people to do it. So you can say, hey, I'm looking to have Microsoft integration that does X, Y, or Z. You can go in there and find a developer to do that. So 5.0 made it possible to do that. So the look and feel of the Switchvox web suite is really different in this version. So this is, as I mentioned, the first time we've really overhauled the GUI. So all we've done before this, I think, is swap out some colors and some graphics at the top, but really fundamentally we never made any big changes. So there's a lot of changes that we made. So if any of you know what Switchvox looked like before, you can see that this is very different. Unfortunately, this is just a little screenshot, but I can sort of walk you through that we updated the navigation, sort of refactored where things belonged, because we had the opportunity to do that, thank goodness, because we were cramming a lot of things in places where they didn't quite fit. So it should be a lot easier to find things. But the nice thing is, if you were familiar with Switchvox before, this shouldn't be a complete relearn. I had quite a bit to do with the original GUI. And when I first looked at 5.0, since I didn't have as much to do with designing this at all, I wasn't lost. I give more demos of Switchvox probably than anyone else, except maybe our sales team now. But I got to give a completely cold demo of 5.0 without ever looking at the navigation to some very important customers, and I wasn't floundering. So this is a good sign to me that our users that are familiar with the old interface aren't going to have to relearn. Everything it goes where it should go, and you won't have any trouble finding it. We also sped up a lot of things as far as being able to find things quickly. You can type to find and filter extensions, and it seems to be a little quicker than it was before. This is the Manage Extensions page where you can go ahead and create extensions, see all the extensions in the system, and it looks similar, but much nicer, I think, than it ever did. So that is the 5.0 stuff. But in 2010, we also introduced Switchvox Mobile. And that happened just for iPhone and BlackBerry. And this was the app that allowed you to integrate with your Switchvox phone system from your iPhone or your BlackBerry. But it was kind of an experiment. We wanted to see if anyone would use it, would anyone like it, could we even give it away? It was free, and we wanted to see if people would download it before we developed more for it. But the answer turned out to be yes. Everybody loved it. It got downloaded quite a bit. It got very good reviews. And so in 2011, we continued to develop for it, and we released a version for Android as well. So this year, you can go get Switchvox Mobile for your Android app. What that lets you do, Android phone, what that lets you do is it gives you an interface to access pretty much your favorite Switchvox features, things you would want to do from your mobile phone. So things like the company directory is available from here. So I can fire up my app, pull up the company directory, and find whoever I might need to call, click, and call their extension. Right from there, it'll use either the phone or it can have Switchvox call your mobile device. So as soon as I, let's say, need to call Dave, find him in the company directory, click on him. It asks how I would like to place that call. I can say through Switchvox. My phone will start ringing. I pick it up. It's ringing. Dave picks up. We're connected. He thinks I'm calling him from my desk, but I'm not. I also have access to my voicemail, So it'll send me notifications about new voicemails that I get on my Switchvox extension. I can check them, of course, from there as well, and return calls. I get to see my call history for my extension, and I can see and update my call rules. So this is a biggie for me. I constantly leave the office for lunch and forget to set my call rule to follow me out to my cell phone instead of continuing to ring my desk. Now I can do it from the car and say, I'm out to lunch. And now my calls will reach me. And I don't need to be in front of a web browser to do it. So if you've got a complete Switchvox solution, so you've got Switchvox Mobile and you've got your Switchvox SMB appliance, you're going to be able to take full advantage of those fixed mobile convergence capabilities that we put in 5.0. So you can make and receive calls from your office extension, as well as easily transfer those calls around from your mobile device. So if your call rules in Switchvox are set up to send calls to your mobile phone, you're going to be able to access that in-call menu when that call reaches your mobile phone. Likewise, if I place a call from Switchvox Mobile to anyone else, it's going to look like it's coming from my extension, and I'm going to have access to that in-call menu too. So FMC works without the mobile app, but if you want sending and receiving to be as seamless as possible, I definitely recommend the mobile app. It's important to know too, even if you don't have Switchvox, you can go grab the mobile app and it has a demo mode. So it'll fake being connected to a server and fake some voicemails for you and fake a company directory so that you can see what's in there and what that's all about. So that's what we did this year. So let's talk about the future of Switchvox. So if you've been to one of my State of the Switchvox talks before, you know that this is usually the part where I get all cagey and try not to tell you very much about what we're up to, because as a developer it gets a little nerve-wracking to put a date and put a schedule and put a feature list on everything. So I always tell you as much as I can. So whenever I get cagey, it's not because I'm a jerk and enjoy torturing you guys. It's just because of the nature of developing software. So we always aim to put in features, but sometimes reality rears its ugly head and there's more bugs in something than we can fix in time, or something turns out to be a much bigger feature than we anticipated, and in order to really implement it properly, we're going to need to touch a lot of stuff, and so things get put off and moved into other releases. So unforeseen circumstances come up, and I don't ever want to tell you what we're up to, and I certainly never have ever told you when we're up to anything. I always just say sometime next year there's going to be a new release, so let's change that up this year. Switchvox 5.5 is due out in the first quarter of the year. I have never said anything like that ever. But we're very confident that we will have a new release. It will be called 5.5. And I'm even confident enough to tell you what quarter it's coming out in. So very, very soon. And what that means is we're still pretty much on track to have an 8-month development cycle. So keep those subscriptions up to date. Renew if you need to. And you'll get all these features for free that we're going to be coming out with. So usually I'm a lot more forthcoming with features and definitely not very forthcoming with dates. This year it's kind of backwards. I can't talk too much about the features that we're going to be putting in, but I can tell you that support for contacts is going to see some improvement. And the concept of contacts doesn't even really exist in Switchvox right now. We've got a company directory, we've got phone books, and how do I manage all of these things, and where do they come from, and what do they mean? That's just going to undergo some changes in 5.5 so that you have some more extensive and improved contact management and usage. So we're going to be consolidating some of those things. This will also be the year that you see us make a bigger move up market. So rather than having smaller appliances and working on how we can really fix things for a tiny, tiny company of 5 people, you're going to see us focus on companies larger than 400 users for the first time. And that means some changes both on the hardware side of the house potentially and also in the software. So we're going to be doing some things that make it easier to manage big systems and put in features that big companies need. Because just making it work for larger companies doesn't really solve the problem in the real world. They need different features and stuff we haven't ever done before. So we're going to make it easier to deploy large systems and easier to sell large systems. So I usually have quite a few questions, so I left us about 10 minutes for questions, but I can answer pretty much anything you guys can throw at me, I hope, and if not, I have people, I have backup. So questions?